I know it was a longer service, and I intentionally tried to draw points quicker so that we could not extend the service too long. I don't ever want to assume that the length of a service doesn't matter, because I recognize we're people and we're sitting on pews and our stomachs are starting to growl as we get toward noon and beyond that. But thank you for your patience this morning. As we were finishing up the camp presentation, I knew about how much time was left, and I really felt like being in God's Word was really important this morning. We had, unfortunately, have had 2 weeks where we haven't been together, and so that really is the focus of what we are as a church, and so I'm thankful that we could do that this morning, and I hope that what we look at tonight will be an encouragement to you as well. John chapter 4 is our text. In the late 1800s, there was a bridge built in New York City, and it's called the Brooklyn Bridge. It connected Brooklyn and Manhattan, and it was an important bridge because before the bridge was built, if people wanted to get from one to the other, they had to take a ferry. And often that ferry would take up to 30 minutes or more, okay? So when they built the bridge, there were a lot of things that the bridge did change, but there were a lot of things it didn't change, okay? What it didn't change, you ready? It didn't change the river. The river was still there. The water was still flowing. It was just as wide as it was before. It was just as deep as it was before. The river by itself was just as much of a navigation block as it was before, except when the bridge was built, although none of that changed, what the bridge did was it connected one point to another, and it made it easier to get from point A to point B. That's all it did. It didn't change what was blocking the way. It simply found a way across the river. We've been looking in John chapter 4, and we have seen the Samaritan woman, the woman at the well, and we've seen her interacting with Jesus Christ. And so far, as we've looked at this redemptive conversation, so far we've been on one side of the river. So far, we've just been talking about water. We've been talking about Jacob's well. We've been talking about you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. We've been on one side of the river. And what Jesus is going to do in our passages today, in a very simple step, Jesus is going to build a bridge from a earthly conversation, and he's going to build a bridge to make this into a spiritual conversation. And what's so exciting about what we see in this passage is that we can take any conversation that we have this week, any conversation that you have with a neighbor, with a coworker, with a relative, with someone that is struggling, with someone that is depressed and anxious, with someone that you come across in the workplace, someone that is fearful, someone that is going through deep water, someone that just got a fearful diagnosis from the doctor. No matter what they may face, that is a real issue that they are facing. And our job, as we have that redemptive conversation, is to acknowledge what's happening, to acknowledge the conversation, and then to build a bridge. And Jesus does it very quickly. I know sometimes we think sharing the gospel is complex and it's difficult and there's so much theologically that we have to put together. Not really. Not really. When your coworker is telling you about the anxiety that they have in their life and they are anxious over an event that's coming up, all we have to do as Christians is communicate that Jesus is the source that calms our fears in our life. Can I share with you, it would be this conversation, can I share with you when I have those types of anxieties and fears, can I share with you the God that helps calm my fears? And you realize in one little phrase, you can take a conversation about almost any issue and you can build a bridge to the spiritual, from the physical to the spiritual. And Jesus does that very simply in this passage, but that's how we take conversations and how we redeem them. All right, so let's look at three things tonight. Number one, Jesus uses what's already in front of him. Jesus uses what's already in front of him. We start in verse number 7, John chapter 4, verse 7. There cometh the woman of Samaria to draw what? What does the passage say? She came to draw water. She came to draw water. So in this conversation, in this situation, Jesus didn't bring up water as the topic of conversation. It automatically brought itself up because she came to draw water. And Jesus, in his as a master communicator, as someone who so masterfully could draw people to truth and draw people to the gospel, Jesus simply went down the road that was already in front of him. He went down the path that was in front of him. Do you know, and I'm going to encourage you, one of the greatest tools to sharing the gospel as a Christian is simply learning how to talk about what other people like to talk about. Because if you can get people talking about the things that they want to talk about, they're going to talk. And as they start talking, they're going to open up. And you're going to begin to see the needs that are in their heart so that you can then tie that need from the physical to the spiritual. Being able to listen to what people want to talk about. There's a reason. And I don't, this is with all sincerity. Like I say this seriously. I love living in the country. We've been here for almost 11 years now. In fact, it's 11 years this week that we were planning a visit to come visit Needham's Grove for the first time. We love living in the country. I don't love the cold weather we've had this year, okay? This icy cold weather, but we love living in the country. So what I'm about to say is not a put on. I say this with all sincerity. I love talking to you men about farming and tractors and living in the country. I love it. I really enjoy that. The farm show this last week, I came home and I was probably a chatterbox to my wife. She was laughing at me. I had such a great time going to the farm show. I really enjoyed it. Walking around and with Brother Arnold and Brother Benny, and bless their hearts, they came away with more pens and candy and gifts and tractors. We had like three men that got tractors while we were there, right? Did you bring your tractor tonight? You didn't bring it? Okay, bring it next Sunday, okay? We just enjoyed. It was enjoyable. It was good. And that is important for me as a pastor. And I say this with all sincerity. I didn't go to the farm show this last week because I thought to myself, I really need to build bridges with Brother Wayne Hussey. I really need to build bridges with Brother Tony Crisco. Now, it does that. I went because it was fun and we enjoyed it. And I've learned to appreciate the life of living in the country. I've learned to appreciate that. I enjoy that. But as a pastor, I have to learn to speak the language of the people that we're around. Like, I have to learn to do that. When someone who is a chicken farmer in our community and we're talking, inevitably I'm going to ask him, where are you in chickens right now? Like, where are you in chickens? Like, where are your chickens? That's the right way to ask it, Tony, right? Okay, I've learned the right way to ask it. Where are your chickens right now? Because that actually tells me a lot about what's going on in the life of that person. If they say, oh, we just went out of chickens, we're going to be out for 2 weeks, I know that they, on one side, are breathing a sigh of relief that pressure's over, but there's so many chores and jobs to do because they're preparing for the next flock that's coming in. Or if I'm talking to Brother Tony and he says, well, I'm 8 weeks in and we're talking about the middle of the summer and we just hit a heat wave, Tony might not be in church next Sunday because he's selling out on Monday, and if his power goes out for 30 minutes, he could lose a whole house. Thank you. I forgot the word there. A whole house of chickens. So speaking the language of the people that you're communicating with is important. Can I tell you, when Jesus spoke to people that he came around on a day-to-day basis, he spoke their language. And he did it by speaking in, who said it? Stephen. He said it by speaking in parables. Why did Jesus speak in parables? Because he was speaking their language. He was speaking in words that they could understand, so that that earthly story, which had a heavenly meaning, would land on their heart and it would make so much more sense. So that means every conversation that we have with someone, there is a conversation in front of us, and our job is simply to take what's right in front of us and to begin pointing it toward Jesus Christ. Notice what Jesus did not do. Jesus didn't change the subject abruptly. He didn't abandon the conversation about water. He didn't ignore the questions that she raised about barriers. You're a Jew and I'm a Gentile. You're a woman. You're a man and I'm a woman. How is it that you would ask me of water? Jesus didn't ignore all of that, but he built on all of that, knowing that there will come a point where I can take this conversation and I can then build the bridge into the spiritual. And so our job, as we're sharing the gospel in these conversations, is to have this conversation, and as it's growing, we're saying, okay, Lord, make it clear. Okay, Lord, make it obvious. Holy Spirit, give me the right words to say so that when we get to that point where it's clear, it can go that direction. And I will tell you from experience in my life, when you pray that prayer and you're having that conversation, God will do that. God will do that. Why am I confident God will do that? Because as we have studied in the book of John, when you pray that prayer, you are praying it in the name of Jesus. You are praying in parallel with the will of God for your life. It is God's will that you share the gospel with your neighbor. It's God's will that you share the gospel with your coworker. So when you say, Lord, I'm in this conversation and I'm looking for a way to take this conversation and to bring it to the spiritual, Lord, direct my steps. Lord, make it clear for me. I believe God wants to do that in our life. Start where people are. Don't start where you want them to be. Don't start where you think they should be. Start where they are today in that conversation, and just be willing to let that conversation become one side of the bridge as you build a bridge over to the spiritual. So point number one is use what's already in front of you. Number two, Jesus created contrast. Jesus created contrast. Look at our text in verse number 11. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Jesus is already talking on a spiritual level, but she doesn't quite get it yet. So she says, it's a deep well. How are you going to draw? You don't have anything to draw water with. Art thou greater than our father Jacob, verse 12, which gave us the well and drank thereof himself and his children and his cattle? Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh, and here's the contrast, ready? Jesus is getting ready to lay out for her that what she thinks is they're talking about, there's actually something different that we're talking about. He says, But whosoever drinketh the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Jesus uses a contrast to bridge the gap between the physical issue, the physical need, and the spiritual need. And he contrasts the water that doesn't satisfy with the spiritual water that does satisfy. This water versus the living water. Now, this water is Jacob's well, you'll thirst again. But the living water that I offer to you, you'll never thirst again. One is temporary, one is eternal. One requires that you constantly return to the well to get it. The other, once you get it, you have the well springing up from within you, everlasting life. One is external, the other is internal. So Jesus is contrasting the physical need, what would meet the physical need, with what God can do by meeting the spiritual need. In Jeremiah chapter 2, you're familiar with this reference. Jeremiah says in verse 13, these are God's words to the people of Israel. My people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and they have hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Do you remember that phrase that Jeremiah says? The people of Israel have failed in two ways. Number one, they have disregarded the living water, and number two, they've dug out broken cisterns that they think will satisfy but will not. Here's why I bring that verse up at this point. When we talk to people who are broken, who are needy, who are needing the gospel, 9 times out of 10, or possibly 100% of the time, they are relying on a broken cistern, something that does not truly satisfy, something that doesn't really bring satisfaction, something that doesn't bring healing. They're depending on that, and our job is to point them to the Christ that does satisfy. For example, someone is struggling with their career, someone's struggling with their job, and they say, well, if I just get that promotion, then I'll be happy. If I just get that promotion. Let me ask you a question, and I ask this seriously. Is someone depending on their job for satisfaction? Is that living water, or is that a broken cistern? That's a broken cistern. It may satisfy for a moment, but what's going to happen is eventually that cistern, that well, is going to run out of water, and you're not going to be satisfied. If I could just get that house, or if I could just get that car, if I could just upgrade this RV, or if I could just get this or get that, then I would be satisfied, okay? Is that living water, or is that a broken cistern? It's a broken cistern. Those are things that do not satisfy. If I could just, you could fill in the blank with all the different things that people lean on. Here's another one. If I could just get through these cancer treatments and get out on the other side, then life will be good and I'll be cancer-free. As much as we want to be cancer-free and as much as we want to make it through the cancer treatments, is our physical health living water or a broken cistern? It's a broken cistern. Because inevitably, Solomon tells us in the book of Ecclesiastes, inevitably, we will all go to the grave. And if we are depending on our health for our satisfaction in the Lord, there's going to come a day where we are going to be greatly disappointed. Because it is all appointed that we will head toward the grave one day. That is where we are all headed. Depending on our health is a broken cistern. None of these things are evil or bad by themselves, but none of those things satisfy. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 2, I looked out, I'm paraphrasing here, I saw all of these things under the sun, all of these things that I tried, all of these things that I attempted. And what did Solomon say they were? He said they're all vanity. It's all worthless. They're all, as Jeremiah would say, they're all broken cisterns. And here's why this is important. Because when you have a conversation with someone who's on one side of the river, they're trying to solve a problem. They're trying to meet a physical need. There's an issue that they're dealing with. In your conversation, here's what you want to listen for. What is the broken cistern they are drawing from? What is the thing in their life that they are longing for? And often when you are talking about people, we're talking with people, and you're listening for that, often the broken cistern isn't actually the thing you're talking about. It's something underneath the layer. You know, I really need this new job, and if I just had this job, then I would be satisfied with life. If I just had this job, everything would be better. So needing the new job isn't the broken cistern. The broken cistern is seeking satisfaction in things other than in the one true God. Do you see how the broken cistern is actually what's going on in the heart? And so here's what our job is, and this leads us to point number 3. We need to take the people that we're talking to, we take them from the physical need that they think they have, and we build the bridge over to the spiritual satisfaction that only God can give. We take the broken cistern that they're depending on, and instead we point them to the God that truly satisfies. I need a better job, or my marriage is on the rocks, or my kids, we're just struggling with disciplining our kids, or I just need real peace in my life. All of those statements, which it wouldn't surprise me if a third or maybe half of you this week that are in the workplace have a conversation with someone and they say something that I just said. It wouldn't surprise me, because we live in a broken world. We live among people that have broken families. We live among people that are looking for answers, and for people to say, boy, I just need this job, or I need this raise, or my marriage is falling apart, or if I could, I'm struggling with disciplining my kids. These are all things that we hear on almost a daily basis. And can I encourage you that Jesus is the answer to those problems? Jesus is the answer. So what did Jesus do? Jesus talked with her. Whatever was right in front of her, that was the conversation. There at the well, she's coming to draw water, so guess what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about water. I mean, Jesus could have taken the conversation 100 other directions, and if he had, it would have seemed forced. It would have seemed like Jesus was trying to make this a conversation about something else. But instead, Jesus says, you know what? We're in front of a well, Jacob's well. She's coming to draw water. So let's talk about water. Hey, would you draw me some water? And of course, then the roadblocks came up, the barriers came up, and Jesus talked with those. And then he contrasted the physical water with the living water that they can have. And Jesus draws her to the fact that only Jesus could satisfy. Look in verse number 15. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Now, Jesus is going to use some other techniques in verses 16 and beyond, and we're going to look at those in upcoming weeks. She is still thinking physically, but Jesus is thinking eternally. Jesus has already taken this conversation, and he has turned it from the physical to the eternal. It's subtle. She may not realize that it's happened, although she is realizing in her heart, because you can sense in her heart, there's a conviction that's starting to happen. If you read through this passage, and I encourage you to read through it several times this week, you'll see in her heart, she senses this conversation is not going where I expected it to go. Because Jesus was directing it from the physical need to the spiritual need. Jesus knew that there was a deeper need. She had a soul that thirsted, that physical water would not satisfy, but he knew that his living water would satisfy. He acknowledged her physical need. He didn't ignore her physical need, but he used that as a bridge to get to the spiritual need that she had. And then he redirected her heart to her real spiritual need. What was the real spiritual need? This is not a difficult question here. There are a variety of different answers. What was the real spiritual need that the woman at the well had? How would you say it? What do you think her spiritual need was? Okay, Brother Mike? She needed salvation, okay? Let's word it a little bit differently. That's a correct answer, absolutely. How else would we say it? She needed peace. She needed to know what Jesus could give her. She had to realize she needed it. And you realize all of these, and the reason why I wanted several answers is because I wanted us to see all of these are spiritual answers. They're all spiritual answers. These aren't physical answers. These are spiritual answers. She needed to see from a spiritual perspective that she needed Jesus. So what does Jesus do? Look in verse number 16. Jesus saith unto her, Go call thy husband and come hither. Jesus is going to confront her about a heart spiritual issue. And you could say if there's a dam of water, an earthen dam that's holding back the conversation, when Jesus asked this question, it's like the doors just open up. Like the conversation goes from a physical conversation about the physical needs to where it is purely a spiritual conversation at this point. Jesus says, go get your husband. Go call your husband and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou hast is not thy husband. So yeah, you're being honest. You don't have a husband. That's what Jesus says. In that saidest thou truly. Yep. So you were right. You don't have one husband. There are some unique nuances that we're going to get to, Lord willing, next week about what Jesus is saying to her. And I do think we need to be careful that we don't paint her beyond what Jesus is painting her, what Jesus is saying about her. Clearly, the text says that she's living with a man that's not her husband. The Bible also says that she has had 5 other husbands. Now, because of the shame that comes with this, it's likely that those all ended in some level of divorce. It's possible, although I don't think it's likely, it's possible that this woman had 5 husbands that had all passed away. It's possible. The text doesn't say that. It's not likely because there's a lot of shame that she's carrying. So what's more likely is this woman has had a broken past filled with divorce and remarriage. Now, I'm gonna challenge what often sometimes we hear about this passage. In this culture, first century Jewish Palestinian regional culture, Middle Eastern culture, according to the law, according to what the Pharisees asked Jesus in Matthew chapter 19, who was responsible for divorce? Was it the husbands or the wives? It was the husbands. It was the husbands. So we're going to be very careful, especially next week when we get into this text. We're going to be very careful that we don't add into it beyond culture. Now, that's different in our culture today. Living where we are today, someone could be married, divorced, multiple times, living with someone that's not their wife, and it could be both on the head of the husband or the wife or both. Like there's multiple points of who is responsible for that. But in this culture, this is not a woman who would have been responsible for that. Now, she is living with a man that's not her husband. Is that sin? Yes or no? Absolutely, it's sin. So she is in sin. But Jesus is not doing this to expose the absolute wickedness of her heart. You're a promiscuous woman that's been married for 5 times and you're just sleeping around and living with a bunch of men, because that's not culturally what would have happened here. If she was divorced 5 times, it's because there were 5 men that set her aside. And likely, because we know this was happening, because they talked with Jesus about this in Matthew 19, they were looking for excuses to divorce their wives to justify putting their wives away. We know that was happening culturally and biblically. Jesus, though, touches her right where she is sensitive. He touches a nerve, a little place on her where she knew that he knew what she was going through. And it points out to her the spiritual need that she has. The real issue is that her soul is thirsty. She's been trying to satisfy the thirst of her soul in other places. With religion, we're going to read that in the text. She's been trying to satisfy it with other relationships, and none of that has satisfied her soul. Why? Because Romans chapter 3, verse 23 tells us that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Only Jesus satisfies. Would you say that with me? Only Jesus satisfies. Say it again. Only Jesus satisfies. That's where we're building the bridge to. Do you see that? That's where we're building the bridge to. No matter what conversation we're having on this side of the river, we're building the bridge to only Jesus satisfies. Only Jesus can bring peace to a broken heart. Only Jesus can give purpose to a life that to this point has seemed with no purpose. Only Jesus can bring healing when life brings pain and suffering. Only Jesus can bring satisfaction when everything else leaves us unsatisfied. Only Jesus can meet the needs that we have in our life when our jobs and our financial status leaves us up in the air and we don't know how we're going to provide for us. Only Jesus is our true and faithful friend when the rest of our family betrays us and walks away. Only Jesus. And Jesus satisfies over and over and over again. So this week, no matter what conversation you have with someone, remember that Jesus satisfies. And our job is to listen for what is the broken cistern that this person is drawing from that is not satisfying. And we simply point them to the fact that Jesus will satisfy that need in your heart. Jesus satisfies. So here are the steps as we finish up. Step number 1, we listen for the thirst of a person's heart. What are they really longing for? When your coworkers complaining about stress or deadlines, they're revealing that their soul is weary. Their soul is, they're just tired. They're not satisfied with life. Jesus satisfies. When your neighbor talks about a troubled marriage or problems with their family, problems with kids or grandkids, what they're exposing is the brokenness of relationships. Can I share with you that Jesus Christ is a friend that never walks away from us? Jesus Christ offers a relationship that when you are one of his children and in his family, you will never be rejected. You will never be disowned. We have to listen first. We have to listen to what our neighbors and our coworkers are telling us. Jesus went into this conversation listening. He said, all right, what are we going to talk about? And where they're at the well, they're drawing water. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. And you let that conversation lead you. This last week, when we were at the farm show, we left. And for those that have never been with the men on Thursday, just ask one of our men. They can give you the minute-by-minute detail of what we do because we do the same thing every year, okay? And it's great. Leave from here, we go to Pam's farmhouse. Is that the name of it? Okay, eat breakfast. From there, we go to the farm show. We're there till about 12:30. And afterwards, we go to Kentucky Fried Chicken and we eat at KFC. And then after we eat at KFC, we go to Ag Supply, and we get more farm stuff at Ag Supply, okay? We were at Ag Supply, and we had been there for about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, and I think I kind of thought, you know, I'd walked through most of what I was going to walk through and picked up a few things that I needed to pick up, and Vance, you here? Okay, Vance said, hey, Pastor Harry, Jeremy Moore is in the back, and he's talking to Tony Crisco, and if you get a chance, you ought to go back there and talk to him. For those that don't know, Jeremy Moore is a man in our community. He has kids that go to, I would say, Westmore and then a son that's at Northmore. So he's got one that's in 8th grade going into 9th grade, and then he's got one that's already over at Northmore. Jeremy is a dear Christian that has just gone through the absolute physical ringer. He has just been through it. All sorts of surgeries that have come from getting kicked or knocked over by a bull. He's broken both of his legs. He has some sort of degenerative bone disease, and it's just been a lot. He had been at the farm show, made it to Ag Supply, and was sitting in the back, and he's in his wheelchair talking to Tony. And so I walked back that way, pulled up a chair. Before we were done, I think there were about 6 or 7 of us back there borrowing the rocking chairs back in the back of the store. And it was good to just sit and listen to Jeremy talk and to hear what God is doing in his life and to hear how God is walking with him through a very difficult and hard time, what we would call a trial. It's a hardship and trial, and yet God has been faithful to him through that. And you know what? I learned a lot about Jeremy on Thursday that I didn't know about him. I know I've met him in the past, but now if I saw him, I would be more than happy to stop by and sit down and talk with him. I know him more now because I was willing to just listen. It was so good to hear him talk and to hear him just praise the Lord for his goodness to him during hardship and trial. Can I pass along? Jeremy wanted me to tell us as a congregation 2 things. Number 1, how much he appreciates our prayers. He's been on our prayer list many times. Many of you have prayed for him as he's gone through so many things. And number 2, Jeremy is thankful for our live streaming program, our live streaming ministry. He goes to a really good church, but they don't live stream. And when he's not able to be at church, he live streams Needham's Grove Baptist Church, and he is able to worship with us as a church right here in our community. And I'm thankful that we had people in our church that saw the need for that years ago and said, hey, let's consider live streaming. I'm thankful we went that direction. That's such a blessing, such a good thing for our community. I learned a lot from Jeremy, though, because I listened. So listen. And then number 2, build that bridge. Build that bridge. And we build that bridge by pointing people to Jesus, pointing them to the fact that only Jesus satisfies. Remember that broken cistern that they are drawing from that is not going to satisfy forever. Jesus does satisfy. And boy, I tell you what, we can take any conversation this week. In fact, we're going to pause. We're going to pray as we close tonight. And I want us to pray specifically. Can we have 2 men that would be willing to? Brother Arnold, I'm going to ask if you'd pray. And Brother Mark, would you be willing to pray for us as well? And I know Brother Mark's new in our church, but I appreciate their faithful ministry over the years. We're going to pray specifically for these 2, for this thing, that as we go out this week, that God would, number 1, bring to us the people that we can have these redemptive conversations with. And then number 2, that God will direct our steps so that we will hear the true cry of their heart, and we will be able to simply point them to Jesus, that Jesus satisfies. All right? So we're going to close in prayer. Brother Arnold, if you'll pray, and then Brother Mark, if you'll close in prayer. Brother Wayne, go ahead. Absolutely, yes. Okay, so pull up what again? The barber, the preacher, and the haircut. Okay? And just listen to it, all right? So the barber, the preacher, and the haircut. If you struggle with talking to people, okay, the barber, the preacher, the haircut, it's going to help you, okay? I don't know how, but Brother Wayne does, so I'm trusting you on this one, okay? Okay, fantastic. We'll watch that tonight, okay? Brother Tony, go ahead. Absolutely. Okay, so as we're praying, men, we will in just a moment. As we're praying, men, make sure we're praying for not just generally, but for those specific people in our lives that God will give us opportunity to share our faith with them. Brother Wayne, as we close, what was the results?
There's 59 voters. Number one was 59 yes, no no's. Second recommendation was 57 yes, no no's, 2 abstain.
Okay, good. All right, Brother Arnold, if you'll pray, and then Brother Mark, if you'll close us.